to the June 15th, 2020 special meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Cupertino. I call this meeting to order. Will Madam Clerk please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Moore. Okay, let's see, Vice Chair Wang.
Yep, Vice Chair Wang here.
Commissioner Takahashi.
Here.
Commissioner Fung.
Here.
I don't see Commissioner Saxena, but he did ask for a link. So we'll give him a minute to join us.
I'll send him another link.
Thank you.
Okay, we can make a note on the minutes when he joins the meeting. And Vice Chair, excuse me, and Chair Moore?
Present.
Thank you.
Okay. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Brown Act and a recent executive order issued by the governor to facilitate teleconferencing to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. Ordinarily, the Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. The governor's executive order has suspended those rules. The executive order does require that we continue to notice meetings in advance. The city has met all of the applicable notice requirements. Members of the public may offer public comment by email to planning@cupertino.org prior to the close of the public comment period for each agenda item. Staff will share all such comments with the commission, subject to the time limits applicable to public comment, which are 3 minutes, and make them part of the record. And if you are dialing in, you want to hit *9. So we'll begin with approval of the minutes. Item 1, subject draft minutes of the May 12th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Recommended action, approve or modify the draft minutes of May 12th, 2020. So please take a moment to review them if you have not had a chance.
While the commission is reviewing the minutes, I would just note that Commissioner Saxena has joined the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, make the motion to
for some
approve the
reason I
minutes.
didn't get the link on time.
I second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Wang.
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Takahashi.
Aye.
Commissioner Fung.
Approve.
Commissioner Saxena.
Approved?
And Chair Moore.
Aye. Thank you. So
Thank
now
you. The
we
motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now we move on to oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter within the jurisdiction of the commission and not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. In most cases, state law will prohibit the commission from making any decisions with respect to a matter not on the agenda. Okay, so I'm moving to attendees, and I see that Peggy Griffin has her hand up. So I'm going to unmute her and welcome, Peggy. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes and begin.
For the first time, I won't use all 3. I just have a question to the commission. You are the Planning Commission, and at the City Council agenda tomorrow, it lists item 24, potential PDA for Bub Road special area. I don't understand why it didn't go before the Planning Commission first. And I will bring this up again at the City Council meeting, but it seems like planning should have had a review of it. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peggy. And I see that Lisa Warren has her hand up.
Okay, I'm here. I wasn't
Okay.
going to ask the clerk to read it, but I will just read it myself, and now I gotta find it. Hang on. So I'd first like to remind you that there has been commission discussion and public requests related to agendizing a study session of sorts, whatever it needs to be, for the purpose of reevaluating the current municipal code language and intent tied to residential balconies and residential privacy screening landscaping, including but not limited to shrub and tree selection list. Please make it clear to the public when this will be happening. I had hoped it would be on your agenda before now. It has been stated by at least one sitting commissioner that this is long overdue. Secondly, there is a postcard that was sent by KT Urban Westport, not by the city, last week. The cards were not citywide and they were not addressed with location. They only said current resident with nothing else. It's not known who actually received them or who was intended to receive them or why they received them. They're very vague. Anyway, the original schedule for reviewing Westport project was the ERC on April 16th, which had happened. PC, yes, you had it May 12th, but it had changed by then. And then City Council was supposed to see it June 2nd, but we know that's been postponed. We don't know till when. The ERC meeting occurred on schedule and with essentially the summary of info that was provided on the citywide postcard notice that gave all tentative public hearing dates. The Planning Commission agenda of May 12th did not include public hearing, did include public hearing on the subject, but the project had changed from when it was presented to the ERC on April 16th. There has been chatter that after May 12th Planning Commission, the project was changing again. And that's why it didn't go to council on June 2nd. No details have been made public, but it's clear to me that the item should go back to Planning Commission, however it's changed, before the project can be agendized on the City Council calendar. There have been no further public meetings beyond your May 12th meeting. There's no indication on the city website as of this afternoon that the plans of how they've changed or that they've changed. However, there is a KT Urban Westport postcard that and it is asking for what people think, and we don't know who those people are or how they're supposed to really tell them what they think. And the postcard refers to a website that has no information really beyond what's on the postcard, except for a few architectural images and some links to press items, and some of those are behind paywalls, so people won't be able to see them. And at least one that I did see contains inaccurate information.
Okay, so, please finish up, Lisa. The 3 minutes is over.
Sure. There's no publicly known. Anyway, I certainly hope that the right thing will be done and that whatever this new plan is goes first to you guys, Planning Commission, with adequate noticing to you and the residents at the very least. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. And I have someone whose phone number ends 4172.
Hi, it's Jennifer. Hello, Planning Commission. This is Jennifer Griffin. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, Jennifer. I'm starting the timer.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I just want to remind everyone that the big housing bills are working their way through Sacramento. We have SB 902 from our friend Senator Scott Wiener, and SB 899, which is the strange Let's Make Churches Be Bad Neighbors bill. That's SB 899. That's winding its way through Sacramento. 902 is sort of the Scott Wiener replacement for SB 50. SB 827. God, I think this is the fourth, excuse me, I should say that, 4 different bills that he has come up with. There is big money backing these bills. It's pretty much, we want it written, so we will have the money go somewhere. We have to remember that the governor has the right to sign these bills into action in September and October. I don't know if that's been changed because of the short season there. There's been a lot of things going on, but we have to remember that SB 902 was introduced in January, February. 899 came along with it. We have a group of 5 bills that I believe that Tony Atkins introduced, which are very strange. They're very, very similar to 902. I'm not sure what's going on there, but we need to be watchful and mindful that there is money backing these bills, and I don't consider it a democratic process. Anyway, thank you very much. Be mindful, be aware, but these people are after our neighborhoods, and they want to triplexize Cupertino. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. And I see no further hands raised. Do we have written communications? I believe we have some that we received.
The only email that's in our mailbox at this time is the email that Lisa Warren was going to have me read. I don't see anything in the mailbox at this time.
Okay, great. And so we move on to consent calendar. We have nothing on consent calendar. And next is our public hearing. Item 2, subject the review of the 5-year capital improvements program fiscal years 2021 to 2025.
Yeah, we have our, this is Ben Furia, Director of Community Development. So we have the Public Works team here today to bring you a presentation and answer questions for you. I'll ask the panel as well as attendees if you could mute your mic if you're not speaking. That would be very helpful. With that, I'll hand it over to the Public Works team. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Director Fu, thank you. Chair Moore, Vice Chair Wang, Planning Commissioners, good evening. Roger Lee, Director of Public Works. I want to start off, with our presentation. Just a sincere thank you for taking time out of your busy and all unusual schedules that we all share today, and during this time to have this special meeting for us to bring our CIP projects to you for general plan conformity. I know that Chair Moore was introduced the topic being a 5-year CIP. Because of the economic uncertainties, that have been presented with COVID, we're not going that far forward with our CIP projects right now. We're just being very fiscally conservative in the new projects that we are requesting of Council. We had a study session with Council back on June 2nd with these projects that Michael Zimmerman, the CIP project manager, is going to be going over with you, or Alex Asinas. He's also part of our Public Works team, the project manager. These projects were reviewed with Council on the 2nd. And Michael will mention just one change where 2 projects have since now been consolidated into one. But overall, compared to prior years, it's a very lean CIP program. And again, it's just in recognition of the economic times that we may be in. So with that, I'll introduce Michael Zimmerman, our Capital Improvements Project Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Can everybody see that screen?
No, not yet.
Oh, no.
All right, how about now?
Yes, you're good, Michael.
All right. So these are the 9 new projects we're proposing for fiscal year 2020-21. This is a reflection of, as Roger mentioned, the reduced revenue that we're anticipating due to the COVID-19 situation and the shelter in place. These projects were recommended based on moving projects forward, getting some significant answers that we need in order to make some additional investments in our city facilities going forward. And so with that, let me start with the annual playground replacement. So this project is envisioned to replace some playground equipment at some of our older city playgrounds. There are two in particular, Creekside Park, followed by Varian Park, that are over 18 years old, and the equipment is worn out and dated, and finding replacement parts is extremely difficult. So this is envisioned to be an annual replacement program where we would go through from oldest to newest and replace the worn playground equipment with new, exciting, unique equipment that meets the preferences of the community. The goal is to replace the dated playground equipment with new equipment and make each playground slightly unique. One of the things we heard in the Parks and Rec master plan process was city playgrounds are all cookie cutter. And so what we're going to try to do is add, vibrant colors, different features at different playgrounds, and make each one slightly unique. Second project we have envisioned is a high-level review of the golf course operations and the blue pheasant operations at Blackberry Farm. This study would build on a study built back in 2015 and the recommendations made by the National Golf Association. The outcome of the study would help determine the level of investment required in the facility. And basically we would start with a community outreach program to determine which alternatives we should study, and then conduct an economic analysis and report findings out to council. The results of this study would then provide input to the Stevens Creek Corridor Master Plan, and would provide the council with some information as to what level of investment would be most prudent. The Park Amenity Improvements Program is also considered to be a annual program, and this would provide funding for individual improvements at city parks. These are envisioned to be minor improvements that would provide increased recreational opportunities at each park. It would fund such things as benches, hydration stations, picnic tables, shade structures or shade trees. You can see the list right there. These are considered low cost but high impact improvements, and it would allow us to be more responsive to community needs for improvements. Right now it's envisioned that since we completed the Parks and Rec Master Plan, we would engage in some park specific strategic plans, but this process takes a while for community input and just working through the CEQA process. So this would afford us the opportunity to provide amenities citywide while we're working through those various park specific plans. Next project is the Stevens Creek Boulevard Class 4 Phase 2 design project. This is envisioned to build on the basically the Phase 1 project, which was from Wolf to Tantaw Road. This stretch would be from Wolf to Highway 85. This would be the design of a separated bikeway along Stevens Creek Boulevard, both sides of the road, including signal upgrades. They would have separate bike detection phases, as well as a physical separation between the vehicles and the bikes. Again, this is design only. This would better position us for grant funding moving forward. Or if the council decides to fund it going forward, this would help provide a more complete, or the next phase of the Stevens Creek Boulevard project. The traffic calming project is also an annually funded request. We are looking to respond to citizens' requests for traffic calming in residential areas. During the year or throughout the year, we receive citizens' requests for stop signs, rapid flash beacons, delineators, channelization, bulb outs, and this is a way to improve pedestrian and bike safety throughout the residential areas on a citywide basis. And it just allows the city to be more responsive with these requests. We envision a process where we would receive a request, and if it was something specific like speed tables in the neighborhood, we would start a petition program. The neighbors would have to go out and collect signatures. And then if they received the correct amount of signatures, then we would do whatever necessary engineering studies need to be performed. And then if successful and if warranted, we would then have the ability to put in the improvements requested. The Cordova Road retaining wall repair. This is an old request that came up a few years ago that was actually funded. It was to replace the retaining wall along Cordova Road. As you can see, it's in bad shape. The wood lagging is failing. As we went out and did a little research on this project, it was determined that actual steel posts are in good shape and they are not leaning. They're structurally adequate. And we thought that we could get away with merely replacing the wood lagging. So this funds the material costs that would be then purchased by the city forces and installed by city forces. This is one of the two projects we envision at Quinlan Community Center. This would fund the installation of an emergency generator, actually a sizing study, and then a purchase and installation of an emergency backup generator for Quinlan. Currently, this is a designated cooling facility, and it's our mass care and shelter facility, and it does not have a permanent standby power. And recently, when we experienced some public safety power shutdowns, we had no available backup power, and there was a delay getting the backup generator from the service center over to this facility. So again, as we've designated Quinlan as our cooling center, we would like to provide backup emergency power, and this project would fund that effort. I should note that we have received a PG&E grant for this project for up to $217,000, and we are exploring other funding options as well. Second project we have at Quinlan Community Center is an HVAC equipment evaluation. So over the years, we've received numerous complaints about cooling throughout the building. It seems to be uneven. It doesn't seem to be uniform. Some areas are freezing, some areas are warm. We can never regulate the temperature within the building, and it doesn't matter if time of year or time of day. So we've tried numerous attempts to solve the problem, troubleshoot the problem ourselves. And this would bring in a third-party firm to do an equipment evaluation and make recommendations not only on equipment replacement, but also the most cost-effective way to zone the building or better control the temperature within the building. As Roger mentioned, we have combined the two Quinlan projects together. It's now called the Quinlan Community Center Multi-Site Sustainable Infrastructure Upgrade. And the price went up a little bit to $502,000, but as I mentioned, $217,000 is funded by a PG&E grant, and there's another $225,000 eligible in grants from the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. So if successful getting that second grant, the net out of pocket for the city would be $30,000. And finally, we have the Sports Center Facility Needs Analysis. This is a study, much like the golf course study, where we would look at the building operations and improvements required, and what those investments would cost, and what priority they should fall under. Again, from the building condition assessment study that was done last year, we identified some urgent needs, some structural upgrades. Those are being taken care of through the Sports Center Seismic Retrofit project that just went out to bid. This is a follow-on to that. So we're trying to identify what additional improvements are required for the facility, and what priority those should be in, and what level of investment the city would need to make in order to make all those improvements. And before we invest in all that money, what we'd like to do is make sure that it's cost effective and the return on investment is there. So this study would fund, or this project would fund that study and just identify all the needs, all the different uses, and what that would cost for the city. And those are the 9 projects that we have proposed for next year. So at this point, I'll open it up to questions.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Anyone from the Planning Commission have some questions for Michael before we open it up for public comment? Okay, Alan?
Yeah, I'll just take
Commissioner Takahashi?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, just wanted a couple questions or a few questions on some of these projects, starting with the playground replacement. This budget of 1.5 over 5 years, about how many playgrounds would that service, if you will, in terms of the renewal?
Right now, we're looking at about 1 a year.
Okay, so 5.
5,
Okay.
yeah. Some playgrounds might need a little bit more, some might need a little less. So
Sure.
When we get into it, we'll determine exactly the need and the cost.
Okay. This one's kind of vague, but playgrounds have been closed now since mid-March. Probably one of the last things to open up. And I wonder if they're going to look different in the future. I guess something to be mindful of is, will playground designs change radically given contagious elements associated with coronavirus? And so if that were to happen, it would be good to at least understand that and make sure our playgrounds are kind of in that spirit, I guess. Okay, so that's playgrounds. Going on to Blackberry Farm. You referenced the December 2015 study.
Yes.
That the National Golf Foundation. What were the main elements of their recommendation?
I believe they looked at full reconstruction of the golf course. That was one option. Second option was converting the course to a 9-hole executive course.
Okay, it's already a 9-hole. I guess lengthening it to executive, is that the? Okay. All right. Okay.
And then leveraging or how to improve, the pro shop, the training facilities,
okay,
the food and beverage concession.
Okay.
This is a quick process question. Would it make more sense to go through each one of these and then get comments on the 9, since there's only 9 of them, or would it make more sense for us to go through all of them at once?
Good question.
How do you want to take care of it?
I was just in case. I figured it might be easier if we heard everyone's thoughts on each one of them.
Yeah,
if you wanted to jump in.
That probably makes
Yes, I think that will be more coherent.
Yes,
So my only question, I wanted to ask a question about the playground, just to understand the depreciation of a typical playground set. So just to know how long that typically, like, you put in for 10 years, 20 years, just into the budget. And I agree with Commissioner Takahashi's comments about how playground design is changing. I've seen some standards being proposed, and you'll probably need hand sanitizers and other things like water facilities closer before you jump onto playgrounds. So you probably want to think about that as well. So.
Commissioner Takahashi, so currently I have everyone unmuted. All the commissioners are unmuted. Okay, so are you okay with having the playground
definitely
discussion? Okay,
yep. So just go through them. Well, that makes much more sense than jumping all around, and so thank you.
Okay, so Vice Chair Wong, have you finished what you want to say?
I'm good. I liked what Commissioner Takahashi had. I just wanted to add that one other comment.
So normally, we plan for a 12 to 15 year life for playground equipment. The longer it goes, the more the standards have changed. Firewire used to be the thing, then it was resilient rubber matting. So it's just an example of how things change over time. One of the things we are considering is how to make each playground each playground
unique,
more all-inclusive, to add features that are reflective of the community and the people of all different parts of the spectrum. So, we would also look at the latest trend in the industry as far as hand sanitation and separation of the equipment, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
May I? In the playground areas, I had two things to speak of. One of them was that I realized the status of the Parks and Rec master plan doesn't make it easy to follow the direction from where that's coming from. But one of the elements I think was strongly emphasized was the consideration of nature play as opposed to the kind of traditional structure. So I hope that there at least can be some discussion with Parks and Rec about where they want to go on that, even though that plan is not fully integrated. And then because you actually had brought up kind of in passing, there was discussion, and I realized there are issues raised at the council level about the all-inclusive playground plan. So one thing I realize if it's off the schedule and for whatever reasons, so be it. But I'm curious, that one, a number of the projects that were here were driven by external funding. Now that one actually had some considerable grant money, county grant money. I don't know whether there's an opportunity to try to look at capturing some of that in a future year. I realized the council had issues because of the amount of community fundraising that was going to be required to complete that plan. But I believe it was more than $1 million. So hate to see that loss.
Right. The grant that we received from the county was 1.448 million. And we're trying our best to keep that. We're in negotiations with the county now to see if there's opportunities to downsize the scope of the project while maintaining that level of financial commitment from the county. We'll still deliver all the elements. It will just be a little bit smaller. We might prep the area and not put in all the equipment and go back at a later date and add additional equipment when funding is available. So that's kind of our approach moving forward.
Yeah, I think that both Public Works and Parks and Rec have been really have done a fantastic job at trying to take advantage of grant money that's out in the community. This was one that was, Cupertino was actually the first city to work with Magical Bridge to look into a project like this when the county decided to put some money behind it. We thought we were going to be at the front of the line, and we ended up, actually having to wait. They used up the first round of money, and then they brought back a second round. And so I would hate to see us lose out on that, but I appreciate your efforts to kind of try to keep that alive as much as possible.
I have a procedural question. We are tasked by the municipal code to annually review the capital improvement program of the city. And when I go to the city, the GIS site, there are about 29 CIP projects listed. And I'm wondering why we're only looking at these specific projects rather than the entire CIP list. And I know that, if it made it to that list, it was previously approved, and that's, part of what we're doing is we're doing a consistency analysis with the general plan. So I'm just wondering why those other projects aren't being included.
So as you mentioned, each year we bring forward the new project list for general plan conformance. So the projects that you see on the GIS system have been vetted through the Planning Commission and were found to be in conformance with the general plan. And so we just build upon that every year.
Okay, so I think we might have a language issue with the municipal code. And as I continue, I'll just read the whole thing, that we're tasked to annually review the capital improvement program of the city and the local public works projects of other local agencies. So there's another aspect which needs to be defined for their consistency with the general plan pursuant to sections 65-400 of SEC of the California Government Code. So the second part there, the local public works projects of other local agencies. Does someone have a solid definition for what that means?
I don't.
I don't either.
Right. Seth?
I'll defer that to the Assistant City Attorney, Seth Petta.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I can share what the relevant, I believe it's a chapter or it's a spread of about 4 statutory sections from the government code say about local agency. I'm not aware of whether that definition is incorporated in the municipal code. So we have to look back at the history of the muni code section if we want to really know what the city the decision makers were thinking. But nonetheless, local agency in those code sections, I believe I'm referring to section 65402 of the government code, is any local district with whose boundaries fall within the city, and specifically does not include a city or a county. So assuming the Muni Code is referring to those CIP sections in state law, likely it's not referring to adjacent cities, if that is something others are thinking it might refer to, and instead is referring to maybe special districts or school districts within the city.
Okay, so it is a little unclear, and additionally, we don't specify that we're only going to look at the new project list. It just simply reads that we're going to review the capital improvement program. And if the intention is that we're only going to look at the new projects, then it should state that. It's not stating that. Okay, so we can continue on. Does anyone have any comments about that? You know, how can we get this clarified? Are we going to make a statement for the city council? I mean, we can talk about this later, but if anyone has some input on that, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, we can certainly look in.
Oh, go ahead.
We can certainly look into that. I think the intent here is that those items are not before you tonight, have already been reviewed for general plan conformity. Now, the general plan would to I would say the relevant sections in which these projects were approved upon were to be updated or changed. Those projects will come back again for review. But the general plan section, which is project we evaluated against, have not been updated or changed. I think the intent is that they've been reviewed and approved already. And so these new projects that haven't been reviewed will certainly come back. But something that we'll look into a little bit more and report back.
Great, thank you.
I actually have one. I looked at that code section, Chair, that you just referred to in the Muni Code, and actually it does contain a direct reference to the government code there, 65400 et sec. So it seems to be clear that it's referring to state law.
Okay, so could you repeat that definition that you shared again?
Yes, let me just get the screen over to you.
Right, so that's definition of local agencies. Right, I just don't want us to be missing something that we're supposed to be doing here. And then alternatively, if there's some language that we need to change in the municipal code to be more reflective of what we're actually doing here, then it should state that, so that we don't end up next time around looking at the same issue.
Yes, so the state law provision that you're acting under tonight, Government Code 65401. I don't believe it actually defines local agency. It's a 1-paragraph provision, and I don't see. Yep.
We have it, right. We have it in our attachment too.
Okay, but then if you go to the next section in the Government Code 65402, that section does define local agency, admittedly only for purposes of that section, but nonetheless. The Muni Code does encompass this provision in in that duty of the Planning Commission, that Muni Code section you've been referring to. And for what it's worth, then, a local agency in 65402 means an agency of the state for the local performance of governmental or proprietary functions within limited boundaries. Local agency does not include the state or county or a city.
Can you list any local agencies of the state that it
I
might
school
encapsulate?
Districts are local agencies of the state. I'm not aware off the top of my head of any others right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something like the water district be an example of that?
Maybe.
Yeah. Or the sewer district, Cupertino sewer district.
Just that's the particular case of, when you go to the preserve, McClellan Preserve, that has a significant amount of its territory is actually the water district, which is within the city, different governing body within the city limits.
Okay, so I think that has been handled. So back to the playgrounds. Commissioner Fung, had you gotten a chance to speak about the playground replacement?
No, the only other comment had been, I had a comment to look at, there was talk about nature play. So a different kind of structure was something that was favored in the, in the draft Parks and Rec master plan. So I would just give that some consideration. You mentioned things being more brightly colored. I think they were actually going away from that in that plan. But of course, that's intended to be over a long period of time, and it's not approved yet. And I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, Commissioner Saxena.
Yeah, I had a question about the matching and other supporting grants which we expect to get. Given that almost all agencies' budgets are under deep stress because of the COVID pandemic, do we have like a firm commitment on them that assuming we approve them, they will go through? Because what we don't want to be in a situation where we budget for something where the commitments are not written in stone, as they say. So does the staff has any thoughts on that?
So I would say for the Quinlan Community Center emergency generator, we do have a firm grant in hand for $217,000 from PG&E. There's another grant opportunity that's out there that just recently surfaced that we're still trying to find the details out about. That is an opportunity, but that there's no guaranteed commitment yet. They just said that we were eligible, and so we're looking into what it would take to better position ourselves for that grant opportunity. And I mentioned earlier the all-inclusive playground. That is a grant in hand, so we do have that $1.448 million in hand.
All right, thank you. I think that was one thing I wanted to understand, though.
May we move on to the golf course alternatives analysis, if anyone has some comments on that, who hasn't already spoken on it? No? Okay, my only question is that we're only looking at having this be a golf course in the future, no changes. I think there had been some ideas of altering it and putting sports fields and some other concepts at one point. Is that correct?
That is correct. So one of the things that we could do when we first start is develop what alternatives we do want to study. So it could be golf course as it is, a reduced size golf course. It could be a different land use. I mean, it could be just a park. It could be, it could be housing. We're trying to evaluate what it would take to make it a more economically viable operation. It requires a substantial investment in the irrigation system, which is about 40 years old. So before we make that investment, are we sure we want to invest in the golf course the way it is? If we want to reconfigure it, now is the time to do it, and what would that take? But if we are contemplating not being in the golf course business, that could also be something we can evaluate.
Okay, just another quick question about the budget, though. We have a scaled back version of the CIP projects, if I'm understanding correctly. So I'm kind of wondering if we're scaling back because we're concerned about what kinds of finances we're going to have in the future. Why would we be spending money on this alternative analysis at this point? And that's an open question, perhaps to share with the City Council. And then for the project justification, since this is going to City Council, just as a suggestion, if you could add in that having different land use is a possibility, that they should be aware of that, because I think the public would want to know that for transparency reasons, because it doesn't, in the project justification, it doesn't seem to clearly say that is in the offing, and I think people would want to know that. Does anyone else have some comments on this?
So I'll comment because I was on the Parks and Rec Commission while that original study was being done, and I think there was a phase 2. What's the name of that? The Creek.
Stevens Creek Corridor.
Stevens Creek Corridor plan. Yes, and I think that there was quite a bit of confusion because when that ERR happened, there was I think it was the kind of standard policy for that analysis that all the things that had been considered in the city, even the things that were not very likely, were picked up in the EIR, and I think that caused a lot of confusion. So for instance, that caused the inclusion of lighted playing fields and turning that back into nature space. So I think what happened was that study, another one which has been blocked, has never been completed. Kind of raised a lot of questions about what exactly was the plan there. So in some respects, I believe part of the reason this is moving forward is because the cash flow is negative because of the old irrigation system there. And there was a study that had a recommendation that existed already. So that's why, it's relatively small in the scale here. I do think it's reasonable to identify the fact that many different things could happen there, but that would actually be, I think, the outcome of approving this and doing that survey.
I think the goal of the analysis is to figure out how best to improve the golf course operation and what level of investment that would take. And then the council could then decide, do they want to make that investment or do they want to explore other development options? But that would sort of be a phase 2 after we complete the initial study.
Yeah. There's a lot of, just as a side note, that actually is included now as part of the open space inventory for the city. So changing it to something else actually becomes a big problem as well. But
yeah, exactly, because I think we're even short of space. So.
Yeah. Or we're just short of the target. But if you were to remove the golf course, then we're,
and we expect more residents and housing and everything to come over the next 10, 20 years. So we should be planning for that also.
So I would mention that I think it's in the floodplain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Housing there would be extremely difficult, but not impossible, but it would be costly. So that's not one.
Insurance on that is pretty bad, actually.
What's that? Oh.
Yeah, the insurance required to do that is going to be pretty bad. It's that's why it's a golf course, and pretty wet too.
Okay,
that's also the problem with that. The property that was torn down next to McClellan Preserve had the same problem.
All right. If there aren't any further questions on the golf course alternatives, can we move on to park amenity improvements? I believe we had some comments on this. Does anyone else have some comments on park amenity improvements? No? Okay, so Quinlan Community Emergency Center, Quinlan Community Center Emergency Generator and the HVAC, you've renamed it. Any comments on these two items? Any questions?
I had one question on that. I'm curious, was the generator intended to be able to operate the HVAC in the event that there were a power outage? Or is it just so that there is power there?
I believe the existing standby generator, the mobile generator that they bring in, was not sized to power the air conditioning. It was just for lighting, that type of thing.
And so is the project that was being looked at now, would that be sufficient to, it takes a lot of power to run air conditioning relative to, making the building otherwise operable.
It would be a substantial increase in size. We're also looking at alternative fuel sources for the generator, not just diesel, but could be solar powered with battery backup. So those are all alternatives that we're going to explore and see what it would take. But that would require a much smaller generator.
So Michael, you're considering a power walls setup, something like that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Great. All right, are there any further questions on this item? Okay, so we're going to move on to the retaining wall repair of Cordova Road. And I would like to see the photograph you have of the broken section, Michael, if you could put that back up just for a second. Because it seems like this project's been around for a little while, and I'm wondering, how dire the need is for this repair, and if it is in bad shape, if it needs to be moved ahead in the schedule.
So when it was originally proposed, I believe 2 years ago, we thought it was in imminent need of, or it was imminent collapse. But then we've had kind of 2 years of not so bad weather in the winter. And it hasn't showed any substantial deterioration since then. So it's kind of remained the way it looks now in the picture. So we have some time. So again, we're not thinking it's going to collapse instantaneously or in short order, but it is deteriorated. And before we have a catastrophic failure, we'd like to replace it, especially since the weather's been good.
Okay, so we're just basically looking at, it looks like it's very small on my screen. Are these I-beams that are just driven into the ground?
These are still I-beams in the ground. And then I guess they're 4x6s or 4x8s spanning in between the I-beams.
Okay, and are those houses up on the slope? It looks like a one-to-one slope almost.
Yeah, there's residential above here.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the leftmost picture. Up the slope is I think 2 homes. Down the street, there's a few homes. And then on the left side of the picture, there's, I believe, 4 or 5 homes. Okay. And those residences to the left are all serviced by this road. So if this were to collapse, then their access would most likely be blocked, or there'd be an emergency crew that needed to go out there and clear the road.
Okay, and how long has this retaining wall been there?
I remember correctly, about 40 years.
Yeah, I had a question because it says that it abuts a private parcel. So why is the city responsible for it, and why not the actual parcel owner?
And who originally built it would be the other question I'd ask.
Yeah, exactly, because this was developed, it was sold. And typically, if you're developing something, you want to take care of all the grading and everything else.
So this is a fairly gray area. It was put in a long time ago. The records aren't that clear. So its ownership is not clear. What I believe happened was it used to be a private road and it was dedicated to the city. So now it's a city responsibility. And we found some old drawings that pertain to the wall, but they're not the most accurate and they don't come with structural calcs. And so we're not sure exactly how deep these I-beams go into the ground, how it was constructed. So, but like I said, it's been there for a long time, and it doesn't seem like the beams are out of plumb. So it seems to be structurally adequate for what it's holding up. Yeah, there have been residences that built up on top of the hill. You know, if I were to venture a guess, maybe they did at one point put that wall in to stabilize their hillside, but again, we can't find any records that allude to that.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, this wall was there on private property. Then the city got the right to the road, to maintain the road as public. And because of that, we are now also responsible for maintaining the wall. Would that be a good summary, or am I missing something?
I believe that's an accurate summary.
Excuse me for a moment. I was wondering, Michael, if you could add the ownership history to the retaining wall repair, so that the city council is aware that there's, well, the age of the wall, how it's constructed, and the issue with a private road dedication. So they have just a little snippet about that ownership history, and the number of residents perhaps that are uphill of it, and then overall how many are accessing, needing that road. That would help, I think. So you're not having the same questions. They can just, read it and go through more easily. Thank you. Are there any further questions on this retaining wall repair? Okay, I'm not hearing any. I can't see the full screen. Okay, so everyone's able to unmute yourself of the Planning Commission. So if you have any comments, just please chime in. Next,
this is Ray. Oh, sorry, this is Ray. My only comment too as well is just to on that road, it's just to understand that, you know, if anyone's done any kind of engineering analysis to see, like, you know, if we had heavy rains again this year, if anything like that would have any impact, just to make sure that, you know, there's no other structural things. Is that something we can quickly do a quick inspection of, or is that something that we need to do a full study or to do that?
Pretty much requires a full study. And you probably have to dig up one of these steel beams just to figure out depth of embedment and, you know, how far down does it go, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is this a typical type of construction material that if the city were to go out and build this retaining wall now, do you think it would end up looking like this? Is this in the realm of the sphere of the possible, the I-beam and wood?
This was standard industry practice for a number of years. I think now when you get a structural engineer involved and there's liability, it becomes a lot more robust. We did a retaining wall on Regnart Road a couple of years ago, and we put in this type of structure and then we put a concrete wall in front of it. But again, that was a more heavily trafficked road, and you didn't want anybody to hit your retaining wall and damage it. So, but yeah, we did. I mean, these do fail, and they, you know, as you can see in the picture, they fail because there's earth up against wood, and eventually the wood will rot out. So
could this perhaps have some more analysis regarding potential liability of doing repair work on this, or, you know, what should we be heading towards for a future solution, something like that? I'm just a little concerned that we might be repairing something that isn't properly analyzed or fully analyzed.
Yeah, I think we should do some form of a cost benefit analysis here in terms of the short term and the longer term liabilities which we're taking on. I just looked at the area. It's on the hills. I'm not sure how many lots there surface, and given the history, it's almost like we got the access. Taking over the road has sort of increased the city's responsibility, and I'm not sure what we got out of it, but there's something I want to understand a bit better and what we are signing up for.
Roger?
Well, this is what Public Works does. I believe we're straying away from what the purpose of this commission is. We're looking at doing what is responsible and replacing the lagging that has shown sign of failure, and we've been monitoring this for quite a few years. So that's simply what this project does.
Okay. Do we have any further questions on the Cordova Road project? We good? Okay, we're going to move on to the Sports Center.
Maybe I'll just comment that.
Yes, Commissioner Fung.
I don't know, Roger or Michael, you might know how much the Regnart Road construction project was, but I think that was probably an order of magnitude more expensive than this, something like that. So, you know, although I do agree that it would be, you know, if the wall is inadequate as proposed down the line, then it doesn't make sense to do. But at the same time, you know, trying to do the analysis and then come up with a solution, you know, when it comes back as a $200,000 project, then we won't do it because there's no money for it at this point. So
it'll be double that.
Okay. So next topic is the Sports Center community needs analysis. And, you know, I have a quick question about this project. This is in the Parks Master Plan, I believe, the consideration of rebuilding the Sports Center. Is that correct?
That was one of the projects that was identified in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, was a new sports center, a larger sports center. And it wasn't clear where the location for that facility would be. It was adjacent to, or in addition to, or if it was a replacement facility.
Okay, so for the project justification, we have a seismic retrofit Is there anything else that you would get some renovations, but could you define what this would be looking to do? I mean, again, it's kind of like the Blackberry Farm issue where we're going to do a needs analysis here, and then we might not have the money to make the change. So what's the overall objective for this project?
This is just to identify what level of investment we need to make going forward. So several years ago, we had a project called the Sports Center Interior Improvement Project. It was to renovate the locker rooms, the front lobby, the restrooms, shower area. And I think it was $1.4 million for that project. That was defunded, basically to fund a new city hall project. But they defunded that project, and then the building condition assessment was completed. We identified that it was structurally inadequate, so we're spending money to seismically upgrade the facility. As long as you have people entering the building using the facility, we wanted to make it safer, up to current code, before we made any other substantial investment. So that project's going forward, and so now we're taking the second step of saying, what other projects need to happen? We've heard from our client department, Parks and Rec, that they're interested in repurposing some space. There's a talk about moving the teen center out to a different location and possibly using that area as additional exercise space. They were talking about moving the child care center downstairs and repurposing that space. We've heard from our building condition assessment and our facilities folks that the HVAC system is old, and they want to know whether or not they should invest in repairs versus replacement. So we would look at that as well. So there's a complete laundry list of projects that we could undertake, but I don't want to start piecemealing it. We want to identify those all up front. We want to prioritize them if possible, and then bring a full list to the council and say, this is what it's going to take to operate this facility moving forward. And then they might elect to build a new building if revenue increases and funds are available. Or they might say, this is a community benefit and we want to keep this facility operational, so make these investments.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that for the Blackberry Farm analysis and the Sports Center community needs analysis, that you're looking at finding the most fiscally conservative path towards making these centers work? And then alternatively, they can dream about doing something more grand in the future. Is that about right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions about the Sports Center? Okay, not hearing any. We'll move on to the Stevens Creek Boulevard Class 4 Bikeway Phase 2 design. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I guess one. What's shown is what's similar to what was installed on McClellan. I think that it's debatable whether or not that's the best solution for multiple reasons. One being just maintenance in terms of sweeping becomes much more challenging when there's a physical curb there. So after a storm or anything like that, I think you're pretty much going to have to sweep it by hand. Second is cyclists traveling at different speeds becomes very problematic. If you have somebody very slow, it will be frustrating for cyclists that are behind that. And third, I question the safety from the standpoint of cyclists actually crashing by hitting that said curb. I think if you look at the buffered bike lane designs in most transportation agency manuals, they don't use the hard curb. They do provide space. Some recommend flexible bollards. So I guess that's my main comment is, as well as the cost associated with cement curbing, it seems to me we want to really understand that before we put a cement curb all the way down from Wolf to 85. As a cyclist, well, when you come off of Stelling, turning right onto McClellan, I have to look way down to make sure there's not somebody going really slow. Otherwise, I'm going to go into the lane, and you have absolutely no protection there. But the desire is to pass the slower cyclist. So I guess I'm just throwing out that it needs to be fully assessed, because there's definitely some downsides with what we have right now. That's all I had.
Commissioner Fung, did you have some comments on this?
No.
Okay. May I ask, is this, are we going to lose a lane of traffic when this is placed on Stevens Creek Boulevard?
There's no road diet. So this concrete barrier would go right where the existing buffered bike lane is. So there's a 3-foot wide stripe buffer right now. And this would just provide additional protection.
Just since Commissioner Takahashi brought up the McClellan Road protected lane, bike lane, did you find that all of the breaks in that curbing were necessary? It looks like it was a lot of handwork in order to form all that. And, it just seemed to me that they could have connected probably 3 or 4 of those together and then had an opening, and it would have been adequate for the amount of rainfall there. Has that been analyzed?
We have looked at that. And as we do the McClellan Phase 2, we are basically minimizing the number of openings. So we're significantly reducing the number of breaks in the curbing, just for that very reason, because it was very labor intensive to install.
Okay. So did you have a civil engineer do a hydrology study and analyze the road and determine how many openings that you would need, for a 10-year, 100-year storm? And that might be a Roger Lee question. I don't know who to ask that. Just
we did have a civil engineer design it. I'll say that. I don't think we performed a hydrology study. I think we went with basically based on experience, what we thought was the best case. We kind of erred on the side of more is better. So we didn't want any standing water in the travel lane. So I think we put brakes every 10 feet. But yeah, that seemed excessive. And when we looked at the amount of labor it took to install that, we definitely thought it was excessive. So we're looking at minimizing that and going every 30 or 40 feet.
Right. So are you anticipating the same width of lanes for Stevens Creek Boulevard? Because if you notice, there's a lot of tire marks on McClellan. It's like a driving test, and people are failing it. They're hitting that curb wall all the time. So are we going to
actually?
That? Yeah.
So the existing lane width on Stevens Creek will not change.
Okay, and do you know how wide it would be for the bike? Commissioner Takahashi mentioned if you have a slower biker, it's going to bog everybody down. Any idea how much width they would have there?
I believe currently they have 6 foot bike lane, and that would be the same that they would maintain. So
okay, but you're going to have to lose space for, if it's going to be a foot wide with curb. If it's going to be raised like this, well, this actually in the picture, it looks almost like about 18 inches.
So the island is going to be between 18 and 24 inches. And then outside of that, you'll still have 2 8-inch wide stripes.
Okay.
So you have more leeway here than you do on McClellan. McClellan was super tight. So it was very unforgiving.
Okay. All right. Are there any further questions on the Stevens Creek Boulevard Bikeway? Okay, we're moving right along. How about traffic calming? Any questions on that?
Sorry, a couple quick ones on that one. It mentions, sorry for the dog barking. It mentions prioritization. How are they prioritized? Is it basically the most emails, the most how does the city determine when and how to prioritize the installation of traffic calming, speed calming, specifically the humps?
Roger, can you help me with this one?
Well, yeah, currently we don't have a process to receive residents complaining of cut-through traffic through their residential streets. So really what this does is we'll establish a process and funding, and the process it'll require a certain majority of residents on that area being in favor of having some traffic calming occur on their street. So it's not it'll be on a case-by-case basis as to how these projects are prioritized for the greatest need. But in and of itself, it doesn't create a priority matrix of how we're going to be evaluating. It'll just be driven by how residents ask for the work to be done.
Okay. Just one quick follow-up. What's one bump cost? So just curious, from a 200,000, is that 1 or is that 5 or is that 10 from a cost versus that budget that's outlaid there?
It depends on the width, and we try to steer it away from drainage, but it could be $20,000 to $25,000. So,
wow.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, it's a related question to all this. Do we ever tie traffic calming as well with police enforcement? So when I'm biking, it's very interesting to watch, and my mentality on biking as to how traffic rules and traffic signs are obeyed. It's different when you're driving, and also very different when you're walking. And I think sometimes having some kind of presence, to actually be there as kind of a reinforcing mechanism would work. Is that tied into the traffic calming process as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, actual engineering controls would be one of the latter steps that would be followed after you've done education, enforcement. There's the 5 E's. But
the 5 E's. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure, because it's I think a lot of it is just depending where it is. I see more requests near school areas and school crossings, like a Tilson and Tantau versus somewhere else. So
well, it's just with the advent of the smart apps and people getting shortcuts to avoid traffic. That's where we're seeing more and more requests to have something done.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anyone else want to comment before we move on? Great. Okay, so we are on to the category 2 projects, ADA improvements. Estimated project cost $475,000 for 5 years. Location, various locations across the city. Any comments? I'm just personally glad to see this. In my neighborhood, we've been having, I'm sandwiched between 2 schools, and we've been having the curb has been cut, and we've gotten the ramps, which is really helpful because we previously had kids having to cut across people's driveways and cut back around in places where there wasn't very good visibility. So I think it's great that we're getting this. Any comments on this item? Okay, capital project support. The description is funding for exceptional or unusual services that may occasionally be required in support of capital projects, so that such expenses may be accounted for and assigned to the project requiring the specific services. Estimated project cost $250,000. Would someone like to clarify what this is? What it could entail? It's $250,000, and I'm not really sure what it's going for.
This is $50,000 annually. I'll give you a recent example. When we built the McClellan Ranch West parking lot, we needed to get a fish and wildlife permit. That permit came with conditions, and one of the conditions was 5 years of mitigation monitoring. Now, that was not something that we had contemplated when we put in the original budget request. So this line item would help fund that effort, where we can do an annual report and report back to Fish and Wildlife that our mitigation measures are effective and still functioning properly.
May I ask can you describe a mitigation measure that you needed to implement for that project?
Additional riparian planting. So okay. Planting in the riparian corridor. And so what they want to know is, are you maintaining that planting? Did it die? If it died, did you replace it? That's kind of an example. Okay,
so in the parking lot, I don't think that this would be part of it, but in the parking lot, there had been some effort to have some kind of grid so that it was like a black grid, and so that plants could grow through. And some of that's kind of been torn up. And would that have been a mitigation measure for drainage that would have needed to be reported on? Would that be an example or no?
So different location. I think you're mentioning Blackberry Farm parking lot?
Yes, thank you.
So I don't believe that fell within the riparian corridor, so that was not a Fish and Wildlife requirement. That was just something that we had instituted. But yeah, that would have been an example. If it fell within their purview, we would be reporting out on that, and we would be required to fund the repair of that. So if it had been in the riparian corridor and under their permit conditions.
Okay, so but at this time, this is more like setting this money aside, but you aren't anticipating it being needed. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's just I would say it's an allowance. If necessary, we would tap into it. It's a funding mechanism for new and unforeseens.
Apart from the Fish and Wildlife, what are the other agencies which might require us to have similar efforts? Like
Army Corps of Engineers, Santa Clara Valley Water District, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District.
Okay, so the list is quite big then, so it's not just one-off. And I guess my question would be that when we do the review for the projects, shouldn't these costs be budgeted there or like accounted for there? I can understand the maintenance fact that if a tree is dying, then we need to replace it. Yes, I can understand. But the basic thing, shouldn't it be budgeted when we actually plan for the project if it is sort of a legal requirement to get those approvals from the different agencies?
So the answer is yes. And moving forward, since we've had this experience with McClellan Ranch West parking lot, we will now know if we have another similar type project to look out for things like that. But we're never sure what the actual requirements are going to be and how much those are going to cost.
All right, thank you.
My only comment is in the PDF, capital spelled wrong, but if that matters.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Point. Okay, are there any further comments on the project support item? Okay, not seeing any. CIP preliminary planning and design, description, funding for preliminary planning, engineering, and design services that are determined to be needed subsequent to the adoption of the CIP budget. Could this be described a little more fully, please? Michael?
Yes, so during the year, if a project is added outside the normal CIP budget adoption, say there's a project that the council member proposes or the community wants, this would provide funding to study what it would take, what level of effort, what consultant services would be required, what permitting would be required. Just basically do some preliminary work to figure out how much the project would cost and what the requirements would be in order to design and construct it. So they're just sort of outside the normal cycle. This would provide some money for engineering services just to get a better scope, a better cost estimate.
Would this be a different preliminary planning and design than what is described for the golf course alternatives analysis? Because that's only $50,000. And then the other project, which was quite a bit lower, was for the sports center, and that's $25,000. And here we're putting $625,000 for potential proposed projects. It seems like that's huge. Like, how many proposed projects could we possibly have?
And then there again, this is use it or lose it. So it's a annual 125,000. I believe that's the amount. If you don't use it all, it goes back to fund balance, and we request the money again next year.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Are there any further questions on it?
No, I just want to point out it's wise to do both the capital project support and the CIP preliminary planning and design. It's a great place to prepare for unplanned items, and given the structure of how the budget works for CIP preliminary planning and design, it's nice that it comes back to the budget if it's not used. So just the commentary.
Any further comments? Okay. Streetlight installation, annual infill, description, design and install streetlights on an as needed basis. It's 75,000 annually. Any comments on this? Well, actually, I do have a comment. Are you doing the lumens study for these streetlights and overlap? Because what I've observed, and I saw this, it was discussed during the Dark Skies initiative, and it had to do with not having these areas in a neighborhood, for example, where it goes completely dark and then it ends up getting bright again as you approach the next street light. And some of these neighborhoods are fairly poorly lit, and they are exactly as I'm describing, where you go to these dark spaces. And is there some program to try to even out the lighting throughout the cities and keep it overall dimmer? Like, what's the philosophy behind our street lights?
Well, this project is to replace the old fluted style street light poles that are prone to rusting out and failing. So we're just proactively doing that before they do fail. Otherwise, residents, they do contact engineering and will request street lights. And one example was like on Randy Lane about a year or so ago. We did do that. So that's what this project does.
Okay, so are there streetlight plans which were done showing the amount of lumens that you would have and the overlap at any time, or was it just we're going to put a street light every so many feet in a neighborhood and we'll let it go dark? And
yeah, I'm not aware of any study like that, Chair Moore. Our streetlights, they changed out like in about 2010, I think, right around that time period to inductive lighting, and that's what we have today.
Okay, so I am kind of curious if the Dark Skies initiative will have something about the street light installation and design in the future.
Yeah, right now this just replaces things in kind.
Okay. So it's the fiscally conservative, like some of the other programs as well. Okay, great. Are there any other questions?
Just a question of curiosity: how much does base induction-based street light cost to install versus the high pressure sodium streetlights?
Well, don't quote me. I mean, the induction is phasing out because of the LEDs. And there's now cost savings by having LED lights with PG&E. Back in 2010, it was not significant. Really your cost is in the pole and the arm, and it's also in the head, but it's just getting the power there. That's where the real costs are at.
So it's like $3,000, $4,000 to install a streetlight, you think?
Well, I think if you were to put in like a new one in a new location, it could be $10,000 to $15,000.
Got it. Okay. Wanted to get the idea what the magnitude was and how many of these could actually cover. Thank you.
How far away it is from power, a lot of variables.
Okay, got it.
All right. Are there any further comments on the CIP before we move to our public comments?
I'd just like to say I think I like the framework you used to select the projects. and it is good you talked about it upfront.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move on to public comments, and I see one hand raised. It's Peggy Griffin. I'm going to unmute her, and another hand. Peggy, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm going to start the timer, and welcome, Peggy.
Hello, commissioners and staff. I think I'm going to go through real quickly the items of concern. As an aunt of an autistic niece, I think it's very, very cool that when you upgrade playgrounds that you are taking, you will be considering all-inclusive playgrounds. I think that's very cool. With respect to Blackberry Farm Golf Course, parkland is very precious and very limited, and it's a very limited resource. I don't even want you to consider putting housing on that land. As our city becomes denser, parkland will become even more precious. Don't give it up. Change the use if you need to. And I would like you to please confirm that the library expansion is still being planned and worked on. It's not listed in this, but you mentioned that it's new projects that you're discussing. So I'd like a confirmation that the library expansion is continuing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peggy. I have another hand raised. I see Lisa Warren. Lisa, are you there?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, Lisa. Start at the
Thank
timer.
you. Just quickly, I just want to mention Lawrence Mitty, because a lot of these things are taking money that we are short of. I know you as Planning Commission aren't prioritizing things, but I just want to mention briefly that there is money earmarked specifically for Lawrence Mitty, and I would hope that there would be some continuing discussion, not too much delayed, about what to do there. I know the purchase is on hold. I don't know if the county's back to talking about it, but I just don't like Lawrence Mitty to be forgotten. I know it's a tricky spot, but the money's there, and I don't want the money used somewhere else. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Seeing if I have any further hands raised. I did see a third, and not seeing it right now. Okay. Oh, there we go. So this is person number 4172.
Oh, hi, this is
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Yes.
And I lost my picture of you guys a while ago. I think they're trying to hash that out. So I'm just seeing names. It was stuck on Mr. Zimmerman for quite a while. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to mention the golf course. What is the difference between executive and 9-hole? A lot of seniors do golfing. A lot of tech people travel with their golf clubs, not just tech people, but a lot of people. We have family members that when they're going on a business trip, take their golf clubs with them, their business people. Yes, I have reservations, as Mr. Takahashi did, about having the bollards along Stevens Creek Boulevard. I had my car died on Highway 1 right before an off-ramp into Rio Del Mar last fall when my engine died on my Sonata. And believe me, I had to get off the road. And I'm really, really concerned if you had engine trouble, how could you get over to the side of the road on Stevens Creek Boulevard if there's solid bollards there? You would get hit if your car stalled. I think that we need to probably have lower bollards than 24 inches, maybe rubber. And I'm concerned about how we're going to set up signaling. If you come up to an intersection and you've got a second set of lights for bicycles, it's already extremely complicated now. We're going to be potentially having more projects being built down Stevens Creek Boulevard. I understand a large apartment complex was just bought by Prometheus down across from Valco. I think it's Gardens of Fontainebleau. And I mean, we're going to have more housing going in there, and it's going to be bedlam if we don't have some type of control. But believe me, if your car dies, you need to get off the road or you will get hit. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer.
What?
Thank you. Okay. And so I'm seeing no further members of the public who wish to speak. We're closing the public comment period. Did we receive, Madam Clerk, any emails during this portion?
Hello, Chair Moore. No, we didn't. We haven't received any emails.
Okay, thank you. So we're closing the public comment period. And are there any further clarifying questions or comments that the Planning Commission would like to make? Okay. No further comments? Okay, so I'm going to make a motion. I move that we find the capital improvement program is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061, subdivision B3. The action is a determination of consistency with the general plan, and therefore it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the action may have a significant effect on the environment. The finding of consistency with the general plan is not a project pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15378A. And we find that in accordance with Cupertino Municipal Code section 2.32070C and state law, based on the evidence in the public record that the city's CIP fiscal year 2020-2021 to 2024-2025 conforms to the city's general plan, community vision 2015-2040. Do I have a second?
You have a second. A second.
Okay. I do have a question. Regarding Lawrence Mitty, has that, it's not in the CIP? Is that project gone? What happened?
No, it is in the CIP, as is the library expansion. Both are moving forward. In fact, it's on the, the acquisition of the property could occur as early as at the council meeting of July 7. Right now it is on the agenda for July 7 unless something changes.
Okay, does our city attorney believe that we need to add a statement to this motion addressing that we only looked at new projects? Or do you feel comfortable with the way it's written?
Let me take a look at the language right now and I will let you know.
Or would you like to make a recommendation to, or have us make a recommendation to City Council regarding the municipal code language 2.32070C, that we should clarify that we're only looking at new projects of the capital improvement program?
So I think this just comes down to what the city's past practice has been regarding the CIP. My understanding is you're only looking at the next year's projects each time. I don't feel that there's a legal reason it has to be included either in the motion tonight or in the code, but if you would like to suggest that be done, that's also fine.
My only suggestion would be that they're made aware of it, to let them know that that the language is a little bit ambiguous. That's all.
If your fellow commissioners agree with a proposal by friendly amendment or otherwise to your motion, that would be fine.
Can I make a friendly amendment to my own motion?
Second.
You may go ahead.
Okay, so it would be that our annual review of the capital improvement program was the new project. So simply to clarify that our review was new projects and not the ongoing projects of the CIP, the capital improvement program. So, and Vikram, I have a second.
Yes.
Okay.
My
Madam
only
Clerk?
comment on that, with
Okay,
regard to
please.
that, my only comment would be that, you know, we believe that, and I believe this was in the staff report, that the previously approved projects have not changed in any significant manner. You know, we may want to highlight that as well, if we're going to do that. I'm actually fine with not having a special mention of the fact, you know, the status of a set of projects that were reviewed here. But
well, the only reason why I'd want it mentioned is so that someone else in the future, if they read this, if they read the municipal code and they're wondering, you know, why they're only looking at new projects, it says capital improvement program, which should encapsulate the entire program, that we don't go through the same routine again, just to simplify it for the future. That's all.
I guess
the idea.
I understand. I'm not sure, you know, whether there's an appropriate, you know, from a practicality standpoint, reviewing, you know, the entire CIP, including, I mean, you know, there's a large category which are projects which are not going to be acted on in the next year. You know, I don't know that there would be a need to do that when they haven't changed.
Well, I would agree, because if it made it to the CIP previously, it already had a general plan consistency analysis that already happened. However, my point is just to clarify that we only looked at new projects when the municipal code has vague language, and to let the city council know that that's what we did here. In case, you know, like we did with the general plan, we went through every aspect of the general plan. But here we're only looking at the new items. And I have a visitor that wants to photobomb. Okay. So
I would agree with Chair Moore here, and I think it's important because you know, we often have people join the Planning Commission who have different levels of experience and different years of experience, and it's good to place that context there, as well as to provide that historical context in case the laws change or interpretations of the CMC change. So I think it's good to make that note.
Yeah, I think I'm always for more transparency and clarity in whatever we do.
Okay.
Well, so then I would just say that, you know, we should reflect then that the projects which are on the CIP, which were not reviewed, were previously reviewed, approved, and unchanged.
Attorney Seth, is there a way that I can enlarge my friendly amendment to include that the existing CIP projects were already determined to and cleared of a consistency analysis with the general plan?
We could craft language like that if you know, a majority of your co-commissioners decide to. My preference, for what it's worth, would be, if you look at the draft resolution, the first item actually incorporates by reference the staff report, which I think, if you look at that, makes very clear that you're only looking at new projects. So I think it'd be sort of done already by virtue of that.
However, the municipal code is saying that we're going to review the capital improvement program. So that's where the problem, you know, exists, is not in the staff report in what they said that we're going to be doing, but rather in the municipal code and what the municipal code is laid out for our task.
Yeah, I mean, I would just go back to what I believe Commissioner Fung already said, which is that you already have reviewed the prior projects for consistency. And
okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, further altering my friendly amendment is unnecessary.
And could actually cause confusion, I think. Yeah. So I think incorporating the staff report, despite the difference you've pointed out with the Unicode, is actually clear enough.
Okay.
If I could just say one more thing on this, I think it's only that I would not want to create confusion that only new projects were reviewed and that somehow, something might have changed on a previous, something might have changed on the library project and that didn't get reviewed here. So I feel like that the friendly amendment is creating some question as to, gee, was there more stuff that was supposed to get looked at? And the answer, I think, is no, because we had looked at these things before they were approved and they are unchanged as of today.
I think that's the answer that should anyone from the public ask about that. We simply tell them we've already looked at all those projects and we made a choice and we took our attorney's advice that we would not, further add to our amendment that we made. And that is assuming that someone is going to dig into that as well and ask the question. But should it arise, we have a ready answer.
And I would only argue that is true as well. The fact that what we reviewed were only the new projects. So, we could have not said that in the resolution, but answered that. But that is an appropriate answer for anybody who. I mean, obviously, there's been no question as to what exactly was in what was in our packet today.
Well, I think. Right. Well, and also in our packet, we had attachment 2, and that's what led to this issue. And I think you see it very clearly what the concern is. Because if I read it strictly, we should be looking at the entire capital improvement program. And my original thought was, all we have to do is have a list of what all those other projects are and put that in as in our amendment to our resolution to say, yes, that we found all of those items exempt and all these new items exempt, and we have the previous ones which had already been found exempt. That was an alternative way to work around what the municipal code has. And does anyone prefer that?
I actually like that. I think it's good to be explicit about that. We only reviewed the projects that we believe needed a review to find any CEQA exemptions. And we made the assumption that the ones that were not given to us had already been approved. Is there some way to do that to the city attorney staff?
Someone could propose language, to make that clarification. I do want to reiterate that I think it could create confusion, raise the question as to why the clarification has been made. Does it actually imply that there is some inconsistency with the general plan regarding the prior approved CIP items? There's no requirement I'm aware of that the Planning Commission approve multiple times the CIP or portions thereof. It's kind of a one-time approval under the state law. So I do get why you want to make the change. I just think it could cause confusion. And
related to what you said, Ray, although I understand your point. There's not an assumption that these things were previously approved. They were previously approved. So again, I only look at this as there's a modification that's being proposed. The modification kind of says, well, there's a condition that's attached to these things, but I don't think that it's a condition of much consequence.
Commissioners, if I may, you've heard some legal support and suggestions here from the city attorney's office that moving forward, that this is your vote on this will be secure and it's clear. If the intent really is for us to take a look at this particular code section, see if there's ways to further clarify that for the future, we can certainly look at that. But I think the city attorney's office has provided some support to kind of address your concern about this particular item.
Well, do I have support for the motion with the friendly amendment? Yeah.
Sorry, are you talking to the attorney or to
the commission?
The commission.
I would vote no on the friendly amendment. But I have no problem with the original. The original one is as presented.
Commissioner Takahashi?
I don't have a huge problem with it either way.
It seems redundant, but in the spirit of a vote and moving on, I would support it.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote for the motion with the friendly amendment?
Okay, thank you, Chair Moore. Vice Chair Wang?
Aye.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Fung?
Yes.
Commissioner Saxena?
Yes.
And Chair Moore?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that concludes item 2. And thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And Roger and Seth for helping shepherd that through. We have no old business. Do we have any new business?
Thank you again for your time. Special meeting.
Thanks, Roger.
Bye now.
Any new business?
No new business from city staff.
Great. And any staff and commission reports?
No staff report.
It's not a report, but if I can make well, yeah. Ben, did you say there was no staff report?
I was just saying no city staff report, so I defer back to you guys.
Right.
My only comment, as a commissioner comment, I think that, these are very tough times from a budget standpoint. We see this in the kind of scope of the CIP before us today. And of course, council's going to be working on trying to approve a painful budget tomorrow. In light of that, I would actually just make a recommendation that we consider there's costs associated with us having these meetings. And I think that there may be, in moving forward in the spirit of trying to mine the dollars that the city has, I would consider perhaps not calling meetings unless we have an item which requires a vote. So, an item of, an approval or something more than the approval of minutes. Part of that may be just be, maybe we need to go back and look at what that cost is. There are many people on the IT staff who are here, as well as, as a staff preparation and all. And so I think it's not to say that we shouldn't do these things, but perhaps to group them up in such a way that it can be more cost effective for the city. And that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Fung. And I do believe we've had maybe 3 meetings. It could be 4 even since the pandemic started that have been canceled. And I have to say we got through this topic pretty quick, and I had no stomach for going through the original CIP projects again. I just wanted to make that clear. Any further comments?
Actually, I had a question about the timing of the meetings. I think now that a lot of folks are working from home and not going and not commuting, and the commutes are shorter, can we start a bit earlier? Because a challenge I have is the meetings go late, and at home everybody wants to sleep. And then to find a place where all of us can sleep and I can continue talking sometimes can be a challenge. And in general, I guess everybody wants to be with their family earlier. So while we are on the Zoom conferences, could we consider something like that? And that's for the city staff. And I don't know what the mini code or anything else says, but something to think about.
If I may, Commissioner Saxena, that's a good suggestion. I think what we're trying to do is in the midst of this pandemic and keep things as consistent as possible, changing the meeting time, although maybe appropriate for some of us, it may not be for others. So, because many of us are still working, even though you're working from home, are still working. So taking time off in the middle of the day to attend a hearing may be challenging for the public. So we're trying to keep it as transparent, as consistent as possible, knowing that this is maybe just a short, hopefully, fingers crossed, a short months
ahead, like
time before we go back to
5:30 or
normal schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking not daytime, but like 5:30 in the evening or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, these meetings aren't for us. These meetings are for the public, and the time has always been this time to allow for people that work to be able to attend these meetings. And so I think it would not send the right message to change the time for the convenience of the commissioners. So I would be against it.
I personally am against it. I like the tradition. I actually found moving this meeting to tonight, to Monday, not workable, but I'm here and I skipped, I'm skipping my class right now to be here. But anyway, I want to mention a topic that's coming up tomorrow night, and that is item 24 on the council agenda, and it's regarding Bub Road. So if just a heads up, if you haven't gotten a chance to look at that item, form some opinions about it, I would really appreciate chiming in on it either way. Not having a discussion about it, just hope you will, because it involves the city plan, in my opinion. So please, if you could say some words, that would be great, or write. I'd appreciate it. Any further comments from our commissioners? No? Okay, so with that, our meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.